Sarah Jenkins stared at the reflection in her bedroom mirror, her fingers tracing the stretch marks that mapped her journey across her skin like rivers on a weathered landscape. Outside her apartment window, the Boston skyline glimmered in the early morning light, a stark contrast to the darkness she had carried within herself for so many years. At 32, she was finally beginning to recognize the woman looking back at her, not just physically, but in the quiet confidence that now resided in her eyes. 18 months earlier, stepping on a scale at 347 pounds had been her breaking point. The number wasn't just a measurement of weight, it represented years of pain, isolation, and the cruel echoes of laughter that had followed her since elementary school. "Hey, Whale!" they'd call across the hallways of Lakeside High. "Better reinforce that chair." The memories still stung, but they no longer controlled her. Sarah pulled a worn photo from her dresser drawer, her 16-year-old self, eyes downcast, wearing an oversized hoodie despite the summer heat, desperate to disappear. She placed it beside a recent picture taken at the harbor, her smile genuine, her posture straight, wearing a fitted dress that celebrated rather than concealed her body, now 180 pounds lighter. "You did it, kid," she whispered to both versions of herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Melissa, her personal trainer turned friend. "Ready to crush this morning's session? 6 miles today?" Sarah smiled, remembering their first meeting when she could barely walk for 10 minutes without feeling winded. Melissa had been the first person to see beyond her size, to recognize the determination beneath the layers of insecurity. "I don't care where you start," Melissa had told her. "I care about your willingness to keep showing up." The early morning streets of Cambridge were quiet as Sarah laced up her running shoes. The Charles River pathway had become her sanctuary, a place where each step represented a conscious choice to reclaim her life. The rhythmic pounding of her feet against the pavement matched the beating of her heart, steady, strong, purposeful. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence," Melissa called out, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. Beside her stood 2 other members of their running group, Carlos, a recovering alcoholic who had found sobriety through fitness, and Denise, a breast cancer survivor who ran with fierce determination. "Wouldn't miss it," Sarah replied, joining the small circle that had become her unlikely support system. They began their run as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the water. Sarah fell into stride with Melissa, who sensed something different in her friend's demeanor. "Big day today, huh?" Melissa asked between controlled breaths. Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. 10 years. Hard to believe it's been that long. Today marked a decade since her father's death. The man who had been her fiercest protector and whose heart attack had been the first time Sarah truly understood the consequences of neglecting one's health. His absence had sent her deeper into her food addiction, each bite a futile attempt to fill the void he left behind. "He'd be proud of you," Melissa said simply. As they approached the 4-mile mark, Sarah felt the familiar burn in her muscles, the sweet ache that reminded her she was alive, capable, strong. Her mind drifted to the email that had arrived yesterday, an invitation to her 15-year high school reunion. The names of the organizing committee included Jennifer Blake, once her closest friend, before popularity had created an unbridgeable chasm between them, and Tyler Reynolds, the boy whose rejection had been a public spectacle at their senior prom. "I think I'm going to go," Sarah said suddenly, surprising herself. Melissa glanced sideways. "To the reunion? You sure you're ready for that?" The question hung between them as they rounded the bend near Harvard Bridge. Was she ready to face the people who had reduced her to nothing more than her appearance? The people whose words had carved themselves into her identity like knives? "I'm not going for them," Sarah replied finally. "I'm going for the girl in that photo, the one who believed she'd never be worth more than the jokes they made about her." Later that evening, Sarah sat in her small but tidy kitchen, preparing the grilled chicken and vegetable meal that had become a staple in her new lifestyle. Her phone screen displayed an unanswered text from her mother. Did you consider what I mentioned about the skin removal surgery? Dr. Brennan said he could fit you in next month. Sarah set the phone down without responding. Her loose skin was the roadmap of her journey. Uncomfortable at times, certainly not what magazines would celebrate, but hers nonetheless. Each fold and drape told the story of her reclamation. The setting sun cast golden light across her apartment walls, illuminating the canvas propped on an easel in the corner, her first attempt at painting since high school. Art had once been her refuge, before shame had convinced her she didn't deserve creative expression. The half-finished portrait showed a woman emerging from shadows, her face not yet complete. As night fell over Boston, Sarah opened her laptop and clicked "Accept" on the reunion invitation. Then, with steady hands, she typed a message that had been forming in her mind for months, an application to speak at local schools about bullying, body image, and the long road to self-acceptance. Before she could second-guess herself, she pressed send, releasing her story into the world like a bird finally freed from its cage. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing away the day's heat and bringing with it the promise of new growth. Sarah Jenkins, once defined by the space she occupied, now defined by the strength she embodied, closed her eyes and listened to the rhythm of the raindrops, a sound remarkably similar to applause. The fluorescent lights of McKinley Elementary School hummed overhead as Sarah waited in the administrative office, her portfolio clutched tightly against her chest. 3 months had passed since she'd submitted her application to speak about bullying prevention, and now, sitting on a plastic chair that would have once filled her with anxiety about whether it could hold her weight, she was minutes away from sharing her story with 5th graders. "Miss Jenkins," the principal, Dr. Abernathy, extended her hand. "We're so pleased to have you here today." Sarah smiled, rising to meet the older woman's firm handshake. "Thank you for the opportunity." Walking through the hallways, Sarah couldn't help but notice how similar they were to the ones from her childhood. The same colourful artwork taped to walls, the same scuffed linoleum floors, the same potential for both kindness and cruelty in every classroom. "We've had an increasing number of incidents this year," Dr. Abernathy explained as they walked. "Children have access to social media earlier than ever. The bullying doesn't stop when they leave school." Sarah nodded. "It follows them home. I know what that's like." In classroom 5B, 28 students sat in grouped desks, their curious eyes following Sarah as she set up her presentation. Among them, she immediately identified familiar archetypes: the confident leaders, the quiet observers, and in the back corner, a girl with downcast eyes and a desk conspicuously empty of neighbors. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "My name is Sarah Jenkins, and I'm here to talk about something that happens in every school, on every playground, and increasingly on every phone and computer." For the next 40 minutes, Sarah shared her story, carefully tailored for young ears, but unflinchingly honest. She showed them photos, the teenage Sarah hiding in oversized clothes, the painful progression of her isolation, and finally, her transformation. But she emphasized that the photos showing her physical change were not the victory. The real change, she told them, pointing to a recent image of herself speaking at a community health fair, was finding my voice again. After the presentation, during the question and answer session, the girl from the back corner hesitantly raised her hand. "Yes?" Sarah acknowledged her with a gentle smile. "Did you ever forgive them, the people who were mean to you?" Her voice was barely audible, but the question silenced the room. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness is complicated," she answered honestly. "I didn't forgive them for their sake, but for mine. Carrying anger was like carrying another 100 pounds. It was exhausting, but forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means I'm not letting it control my future anymore." Later that afternoon, as Sarah packed up her materials, Dr. Abernathy returned with the girl, Emma, she'd learned, beside her. "Emma would like to speak with you privately if you have a moment," the principal said. When they were alone, Emma revealed her own experiences. The Instagram account created to mock her weight, the lunch period spent hiding in bathroom stalls, the invitations to sleepovers that never came. "How did you make it stop?" Emma asked, her eyes pleading for a solution. Sarah wished for a simple answer, a 3-step plan that would erase the girl's pain. Instead, she offered her truth. "It didn't stop because of anything I did to them. It stopped when I decided I was worth more than their opinion of me. And Emma," she leaned closer, "you are worth so much more." Before leaving, Sarah handed Emma her business card with her personal email address scribbled on the back. "Anytime," she said. "Everyone needs someone who understands." The weight of the encounter stayed with Sarah as she drove to her next appointment, a final consultation with Dr. Brennan about the excess skin surgery she'd finally decided to pursue. Not for aesthetic perfection, but for the physical discomfort that sometimes limited her newfound active lifestyle. In the sterile examination room, Dr. Brennan reviewed her case with clinical detachment. "You're an ideal candidate, Ms. Jenkins. Your weight has been stable for over a year, you're in excellent health, and the insurance approval came through yesterday." As he discussed incision sites and recovery timelines, Sarah's mind drifted to Emma and the thousands of children like her, fighting battles in schoolyards and social media feeds. The decision to undergo surgery felt suddenly complicated. Was she reinforcing the idea that changing your body was the solution to bullying? "Ms. Jenkins?" Dr. Brennan's voice pulled her back. "Do you have any questions about the procedure?" "Just one," Sarah replied. "Why did you become a plastic surgeon?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. After a thoughtful pause, he shared a story about his sister, who'd been in a car accident in college. "The physical scars healed faster than the emotional ones," he explained. "She couldn't look in a mirror without reliving the trauma. My work gave her back her ability to recognize herself again." His answer resonated with Sarah in unexpected ways. This surgery wasn't about erasing her past. It was about reconciling all versions of herself into one whole person. That evening, Sarah attended her weekly support group meeting at the community center. What had begun as a weight loss support group had evolved into something more profound, a circle of people navigating the complex emotional terrain that came after significant life changes. "Physical transformation is just the beginning," shared Marcus, a firefighter who had lost 200 pounds after a near-death experience. "Nobody warns you about the grief." "Grief?" asked a newcomer, confusion evident in her furrowed brow. "For the person you were," Marcus explained, "for the coping mechanisms you've given up, for the identity you've shed. Even positive change comes with loss." The group nodded in collective understanding, a truth Sarah had struggled to articulate. She had been mourning the girl who had used food as comfort, who had hidden from the world, who had survived in the only ways she knew how. After the meeting, Sarah checked her email to find a message from Emma's mother, thanking her for connecting with her daughter and asking if Sarah might consider regular mentoring. There was also an email from the reunion committee confirming her attendance and, surprisingly, inviting her to speak briefly about her work in bullying prevention. As midnight approached, Sarah stood on her small balcony overlooking the city. The same stars that had witnessed her at her lowest now watched her build a life she once couldn't have imagined. The reunion was just 2 weeks away, and with it, a confrontation with the past she had both dreaded and, she now realized, needed. Her phone chimed with a text from Melissa. "Surgery scheduled?" Sarah typed back, "Yes, June 15th. But first I have a reunion to attend." She looked up at the vastness of the night sky, feeling both small and significant. Tomorrow would bring another school presentation, another run along the river, another day of choices that honored rather than punished her body. The journey wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be. But for the first time, Sarah was genuinely curious about what lay ahead, no longer defined by 180 pounds lost, but by everything she had found along the way. The brick facade of Lakeside High School hadn't changed in 15 years. Same arched entrance, same flagpole, same manicured lawn where the popular kids had once gathered during lunch periods while Sarah ate alone in the art room. She parked her car in the visitors section, her heartbeat quickening as she spotted groups of former classmates making their way toward the gymnasium. "You don't have to do this," Melissa had told her that morning during their run. "Your healing doesn't depend on their validation." "I know," Sarah had replied, "but closure might." Now, sitting in her car, Sarah checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, her makeup subtle but polished. She wore a midnight blue dress that accentuated her collarbones and skimmed over the areas where excess skin still reminded her of her journey. The woman looking back at her was neither the insecure teenager she'd been, nor some idealized version of perfection. She was real, complex, scarred in places both visible and invisible, but undeniably present. The gymnasium had been transformed with twinkling lights, photo displays, and banners proclaiming, "Welcome back, class of 2010. Sarah collected her name tag from a table near the entrance, where Becky Fleming, once the student council president and now a pharmaceutical sales rep according to her LinkedIn profile, did a double take. "Sarah? Sarah Jenkins? Oh my God, I wouldn't have recognized you." It was the first of many similar reactions. The wide eyes, the not-so-subtle scans from head to toe, the awkward compliments that revealed more about the speaker than the recipient. "You look amazing," they'd exclaim, as if her worth had increased proportionally to her weight loss. Sarah accepted each interaction with grace, redirecting conversations toward genuine questions about their lives, their families, their dreams. She found herself genuinely interested in who these people had become beyond the roles they'd played in high school. At the bar, ordering a sparkling water with lime, she felt a presence beside her. "Still not a drinker, I see." The voice belonged to Jennifer Blake, once her closest friend from kindergarten through freshman year, before Jennifer had traded their secret-sharing sleepovers for invitations to parties Sarah was never welcome to attend. "Some things don't change," Sarah replied, turning to face the woman who had taught her the true meaning of betrayal. Jennifer looked older, her once rebellious style replaced by the polished appearance of a young professional, but her eyes still held the same searching quality, Sarah remembered. "Can we talk?" Jennifer asked, gesturing toward a quiet corner near the alumni photo display. "Actually talk?" They found seats away from the growing crowd, the DJ's playlist of 2000s hits providing background to 15 years of unspoken history. "I've rehearsed this moment in my head so many times," Jennifer began, her fingers nervously twisting the cocktail straw in her glass. "I've followed your journey online, your speaking engagements, your advocacy work. You've built something meaningful, Sarah." "Thank you," Sarah replied simply, waiting for whatever would come next. "I need to apologize," Jennifer continued, her voice breaking slightly, "not just for the distance that grew between us, but for my silence. When they targeted you, when the bullying got worse, I said nothing. I chose social survival over doing what was right, over standing by my best friend." The words hung between them, honest but incomplete. Sarah had spent years imagining this conversation, cycling through reactions from tearful forgiveness to righteous anger. The reality was more nuanced than any scenario she'd envisioned. "Why now, Jen? It's been 15 years. Jennifer's gaze dropped to her hands. "I became a high school counselor. Every day I see kids going through what you experienced, and I see others making the choices I made. Choosing silence, choosing safety over standing up for someone. I can't change what I did to you, but facing you, acknowledging it, it's part of becoming someone I can live with being." Before Sarah could respond, the microphone feedback squealed, and the reunion committee chair announced it was time for the scheduled speakers. Sarah excused herself, promising to continue their conversation later. Standing at the podium, looking out at the faces that had once been the entire universe of her social existence, Sarah felt a strange sense of detachment. These people had once held such power over her self-perception, yet now they seemed so ordinary, adults, navigating their own insecurities, their own regrets, their own versions of success and disappointment. "Many of you probably wouldn't have recognized me if it weren't for the name tag," she began, earning a ripple of uncomfortable laughter. "That's okay. I wouldn't have recognized myself either, but for different reasons." She spoke briefly about her work in schools, about the statistics on bullying and its long-term effects, but mostly she spoke directly to her younger self, the girl who had believed her worth was determined by her appearance, who had internalized every cruel word until they became her own inner voice. "The most significant weight I lost wasn't physical," she told them. "It was the burden of believing I deserved less respect, less opportunity, less love, because of how I looked. That weight was placed on me by others, but eventually I was the one who carried it." From the back of the room, she noticed Tyler Reynolds watching intently. The same Tyler who had pretended to ask her to prom as a joke, who had led her to spend hundreds of dollars on a dress she never wore, whose laughter had followed her as she ran sobbing to her car. "I didn't come here seeking apologies or to make anyone feel guilty," Sarah continued. "I came because returning to this place as the person I am now is part of my healing. And if any of you are carrying your own regrets about how you treated others, know that it's never too late to become a different kind of person." After her speech, several classmates approached with tearful eyes and stories of their own struggles, eating disorders, depression, anxiety disorders that had been masked by their seemingly perfect teenage lives. The confessions reminded Sarah that pain often hides behind privilege, that the teenagers who had seemed to have everything had been fighting their own battles behind carefully constructed facades. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself in conversation with Tyler, now a divorced father of two working in commercial real estate. He apologized awkwardly, blaming youth and peer pressure, explanations that felt hollow but that Sarah accepted nonetheless, not for his absolution, but for her freedom from the memory's sting. Later, in the parking lot, Sarah found Jennifer waiting by her car. "I meant what I said earlier," Jennifer told her, "and I understand if forgiveness isn't possible." Sarah considered her former friend, remembering both the girl who had known all her secrets and the one who had turned away when it mattered most. "I forgave you years ago, Jen. But trust, that's something different. That would have to be rebuilt." Jennifer nodded, understanding the distinction. "I'd like to try, if you're willing. Maybe coffee sometime." "Maybe," Sarah replied, neither promising nor refusing. The drive home felt symbolic, moving away from the past while carrying its lessons forward. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma's mother, sharing that her daughter had joined an after-school art program and stood up for another student in her class. Small victories that felt monumental. As Boston's skyline came into view, Sarah realized the reunion had been neither the confrontation nor the vindication she had imagined. It had simply been a moment in time, one where she had shown up fully as herself, a self that encompassed both the wounded girl she had been and the resilient woman she had become. At home, Sarah kicked off her heels and opened her laptop to find an email from a publisher who had attended one of her speaking events. They were interested in discussing a potential book about her journey, not just the weight loss, but the emotional reconstruction that had followed. Sarah placed her reunion name tag beside her computer. Sarah Jenkins, class of 2010, a simple identifier that no longer defined her, but was nonetheless part of her story. Tomorrow would bring another school presentation, a final pre-surgery consultation, and a mentoring session with Emma. Tonight, though, she allowed herself to acknowledge a quiet truth. The reunion's importance wasn't in confronting those who had hurt her, but in realizing they no longer held power over who she was becoming. Outside her window, the city lights mirrored the stars above, distant, constant, witnessing her continuing evolution. Sarah Jenkins, once defined by others' perceptions, now authored her own identity, one choice, one day, one moment of self-recognition at a time. The morning of Sarah's surgery arrived with a gentle summer rain that tapped against her hospital room window. Pre-op preparations moved in a blur of consent forms, vital sign checks, and reassurances from Dr. Brennan. Sarah had chosen this path carefully, understanding that removing the excess skin was neither a rejection of her past nor a pursuit of perfection, but simply the next step in her ongoing journey toward physical comfort and emotional wholeness. "Are you nervous?" asked the nurse as she inserted the IV line. "Less than I expected," Sarah answered truthfully. The fear that had once accompanied any form of vulnerability had been gradually replaced by a trust in her own resilience. As the anesthesia began to take effect, Sarah's thoughts drifted to Emma, who had sent a hand-drawn card wishing her a successful surgery. In the 3 months since their first meeting, the young girl had begun her own transformation, not of body, but of spirit. She had joined an anti-bullying initiative at school and had started keeping a journal, tools Sarah had suggested from her own experience. "Count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist instructed. Sarah complied, her consciousness fading as she reached 7, surrendering to the temporary darkness with a peace that would have once seemed impossible. Hours later, she awakened to find her mother dozing in the visitor's chair. Catherine Jenkins had flown in from Phoenix for the surgery, their relationship still tender but healing after years of misunderstanding. Her mother had always pushed for diets, for fixing what she saw as a problem, unable to separate her genuine concern for Sarah's health from society's judgments about appearance. "Mom!" Sarah's voice was raspy from the breathing tube. Catherine startled awake, immediately moving to her daughter's side. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Like I've been through a war," Sarah admitted, wincing as she became aware of the bandages wrapped around her abdomen, thighs, and arms. "The doctor said everything went perfectly," her mother assured her, pouring a small cup of water and holding the straw to Sarah's lips. "You'll be up and running again before you know it." Sarah managed a small smile at the unintentional pun. "Not running for a while, I think." The recovery room was filled with flowers, arrangements from Melissa and the running group, from her colleagues at the community center, from Jennifer, who had made good on her promise of rebuilding their connection over coffee dates and long emails about the past. There was even a small plant from Tyler with a card that simply read, "To New Beginnings." The 6 weeks of recovery that followed were more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. Used to the independence that came with her active lifestyle, she struggled with the temporary limitations, with needing help for basic tasks, with the swelling and discomfort that made her body feel foreign once again. Catherine stayed for 2 weeks, their forced proximity creating space for conversations that had been avoided for years. One evening, as her mother helped change her bandages, Sarah finally asked the question that had lingered between them. "Why did you never stop them? The kids who bullied me, the family members who made comments about my weight at every holiday. Why didn't you protect me?" Catherine's hand stilled, her eyes filling with tears. I thought if you lost weight, the bullying would stop. I was trying to protect you by fixing what I saw as the problem." She shook her head. "I was wrong, Sarah, so wrong. The problem was never your body. It was their cruelty and my blindness." The admission wasn't a magical healing of all past wounds, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that laid groundwork for a more honest relationship moving forward. By the 4th week of recovery, Sarah had begun working on her book proposal from home, transforming her personal journals into chapters that traced not just her physical transformation, but the more complex emotional metamorphosis that had accompanied it. The working title, Beyond the Before and After, reflected her resistance to the oversimplified narratives often attached to weight loss stories. Emma visited regularly, bringing homework she needed help with, a transparent excuse for checking on her mentor. During one such visit, as they sat on Sarah's small balcony, enjoying the late summer breeze, Emma shared news from school. Jennifer, Ms. Blake, started a new program at our school, she explained, referring to the counseling initiative Jennifer had developed, based partly on her conversations with Sarah. It's called Seen, and it's for kids who feel invisible or targeted. We talk about stuff that's hard, but it's not weird or forced. Sarah smiled, recognizing how healing could ripple outward in unexpected ways. Her reconnection with Jennifer had led to program improvements that were now benefiting Emma and others like her, connections forming across generations and experiences. As September approached, bringing with it the one-year mark since Sarah had begun speaking at schools, Dr. Brennan pronounced her fully recovered. The scars would continue to fade, he explained, though they would never disappear completely, a physical reminder of her journey that Sarah had come to see as appropriate rather than unfortunate. On a crisp fall morning, Sarah returned to the Charles River pathway for her first post-surgery run. Melissa and the group had waited for her, refusing her insistence that they continue their training without her. "We're a team," Carlos had told her simply. "We move at the pace of our slowest member, and for the past 6 weeks that's been all of us, sitting on our butts, waiting for you." The familiar route felt new in her reconstructed body. Lighter, not just from the removal of excess skin, but from the shedding of expectations, of shame, of the need to prove her worth through transformation. Her pace was slower than before, her endurance diminished by weeks of inactivity, but the joy of movement remained. "How does it feel?" Melissa asked as they paused on Harvard Bridge, the Boston skyline spread before them like a promise. Sarah considered the question, understanding it went deeper than the physical sensation of running again. "It feels like integration," she answered finally. "Like all the parts of me, past and present, are finally moving in the same direction." Later that week, Sarah received an email from a national morning show interested in featuring her story. The producer had seen a viral video clip from one of her school presentations and wanted to bring her message to a wider audience. The opportunity was both exciting and daunting, a platform that could amplify her advocacy work but also risked reducing her complex journey to a simplified before and after narrative. After careful consideration and negotiations about the interview's framing, Sarah agreed. The segment would focus not just on her weight loss, but on her work addressing the psychological impact of bullying and the culture that enabled it. The morning of the interview, Sarah stood in the green room of the New York studio, watching monitors displaying the busy morning show set. Her phone buzzed with messages of support, from Melissa, from her mother, from Emma, who promised to watch with her entire class, from Jennifer, who had helped prepare her for potential questions. "We're ready for you, Miss Jenkins," a production assistant announced, leading her toward the set. Under the bright lights, facing the hosts whose faces had been familiar to her for years, Sarah took a deep breath and remembered why she was there. Not for validation, not for celebration of her smaller body, but for the countless children still hiding in bathroom stalls during lunch, still believing their worth was determined by their appearance, still waiting for someone to tell them they mattered exactly as they were. "So, Sarah," began the host, "your transformation is truly remarkable. What was the turning point that made you decide to lose the weight?" Sarah smiled, recognizing the familiar framing that she had prepared to gently redirect. "The physical change is what people notice first," she acknowledged, "but the real transformation was internal. I didn't decide to lose weight to become valuable. I recognized that I was already valuable and that recognition made it possible to make choices from a place of self-care rather than self-punishment." As the interview continued, Sarah spoke with honesty about the complexity of her journey, the family dynamics, the social factors, the mental health challenges that had contributed to both her weight gain and her eventual healing. She emphasized that her story wasn't about getting revenge on bullies or proving them wrong, but about reclaiming her sense of self from those who had tried to define her. The most dangerous consequence of bullying isn't just the pain it causes in the moment, she explained toward the end of the segment. It's the way that pain becomes a voice inside you, continuing the bullying long after the bullies are gone. My work focuses on helping children recognize and silence that voice before it becomes the narrative they carry into adulthood. After the interview, waiting for her taxi outside the studio, Sarah received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a classroom full of fifth graders, Emma's class, gathered around a television, many of them holding handmade signs that read, "We see you," the motto of the program Jennifer had developed. The taxi arrived, and as Sarah settled into the back seat for the ride to the train station that would take her back to Boston, back to her running group and speaking engagements and mentoring sessions, she felt a profound sense of coming full circle. The bullied girl from Lakeside High was now a woman whose voice reached classrooms and living rooms across the country, whose pain had been transformed into purpose, whose story was still being written with each choice, each step, each moment of showing up as her authentic self. "Where to?" asked the driver. Sarah looked out at the bustling New York streets, at the people rushing past, each carrying their own invisible stories, their own wounds and triumphs, their own journeys toward wholeness. "Home," she answered simply. "I'm going home."